3 years ago, I stood on the front porch of my mother-in-law's house, holding my 2-year-old son in my arms, with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. The night was cold, but not as cold as her stare. Caroline stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her lips curling into something that was almost a smirk. "You're not my problem anymore," she said, voice clipped, final. "Find somewhere else to go." She shut the door before I could even respond. I was left standing there, in the dim glow of the porch light, my son shivering against me. I had nowhere to go. My husband, the man who had promised to love and protect me, had walked out on us without a backward glance. And his mother? She made sure I knew exactly where I stood. Nowhere. That night, I found a cheap motel, spending what little money I had on a room with a flickering neon sign outside. I held Lucas close, whispering to him, promising him that one day we'd have a home of our own, a real home, a place where no one could tell us we didn't belong. I just never expected that home to be hers. For 3 years, I fought. I clawed my way up from nothing. I took on every job I could find: waitressing, cleaning houses, night shifts at a warehouse. I scraped together enough to rent a tiny apartment, then moved to a better one. I saved every penny, cut every unnecessary expense, pushed myself to the breaking point. While my ex-husband and his mother lived their comfortable lives, I worked relentlessly. Every sleepless night, every aching muscle, every moment of exhaustion. It was all for Lucas. He was my anchor, my reason. I refused to let him grow up feeling unwanted, like I had been Dot. Then one day, fate intervened. I was scrolling through listings, idly checking homes in the area, when I saw it. My heart stopped. Caroline's house. For sale. I clicked the listing, disbelief coursing through me. There was no mistake. The house that once shut me out, the house where I had been tossed aside like trash, was now on the market. The photos showed empty rooms, signs of neglect, the slow decay of a once pristine home. I had to know. I dug deeper, pulling every thread I could find. Turns out, Caroline's finances had crumbled. Poor decisions, bad investments. She was drowning. She could no longer afford the home she had been so proud of. And I had just enough money to buy it. The day of the open house, I walked through the front door with purpose. The walls echoed with memories, whispers of the past that once crushed me. But now they felt different. I moved through the rooms, running my fingers along the banister, the same one I'd gripped for support the day I left. I imagined Lucas playing in the backyard, imagined filling the empty spaces with warmth, with love, with life. And then I saw her. Caroline. She was standing by the kitchen, speaking with the real estate agent. Her once meticulously styled hair was dull, her designer clothes replaced with something far simpler. When she turned and saw me, her face drained of color. "Mia, you," she whispered as if seeing a ghost. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Surprised?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, she was speechless. The power had shifted, and she knew it. I turned to the agent. "I'm ready to sign." The papers were laid out before me, and with every stroke of the pen, I sealed it. My home. My victory. As I took the keys, I met Caroline's stunned gaze and said, "You're not my problem anymore." Then I walked into my house, with my son, this time, through the front door. The first night in the house felt surreal. I walked through every room, tracing the edges of my victory. The floors creaked beneath my feet. The air carried a faint scent of old wood and dust. Lucas ran through the halls, his laughter echoing, laughter that had once been silenced by the weight of betrayal. I stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, the very room where my ex-husband had slept, where his mother had likely whispered poison into his ear, convincing him I wasn't good enough, that I was a burden. Now, it was mine. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of years lift. Just a little dot, but karma wasn't done yet. Dot the next morning while sipping coffee on the porch, I saw her. Caroline Dot. She stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the house that was no longer hers. She looked different, smaller, like a woman who had been chipped away piece by piece. Her pride had been stripped, her arrogance shattered. Dot. For a moment I felt nothing but satisfaction. Dot. Then she took a shaky step forward. I set my coffee down. I knew what was coming. Caroline approached the porch, hesitant. I waited, arms crossed, refusing to make this easy for her. "Mia?" she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I said nothing. Let her speak, let her feel the weight of her own choices. She swallowed hard. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just that same self-pity, the inability to truly see beyond herself. I leaned against the doorframe. Neither did I. Her gaze flickered to Lucas, playing in the yard. Her grandson. The boy she had turned away without a second thought. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then she hesitated. Whatever she was searching for, absolution, pity, an invitation back into our lives, she wouldn't find it here. So calm, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of closure. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I had won, and that was enough. For now. Days passed, and the house slowly began to feel like mine. I repainted the walls, removing every trace of the life that had once occupied it. I replaced the heavy curtains Caroline had adored with light, airy ones that let the sun spill in. Lucas's laughter filled the rooms, washing away the ghosts of my past. But no matter how much I changed, the memories still clung to the walls like shadows. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I would sit in the living room, staring at the front door. The same door that had been slammed in my face. The same door I'd walked through as an outsider. But I was no outsider now. I owned this house. I had taken back what was stolen from me. And yet, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. One evening, as I was sorting through old papers left behind in the attic, I found something unexpected. A folder filled with financial statements, legal documents, and personal letters. All of them belonged to Carolyn. Curiosity got the best of me. I sat on the dusty floor and read through them. The deeper I went, the more I uncovered. Caroline's downfall hadn't just been bad luck. It had been a slow, painful unraveling. My ex-husband had drained her savings. Her once flourishing business had collapsed under debt. The friends she had once boasted about, they had abandoned her the moment her money ran out. And worst of all, she had been fighting to keep the house until the very last moment. A part of me should have felt triumphant. After all, this was karma in its purest form. But as I sat there, staring at the remnants of the life she had desperately tried to hold on to, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. I shook it off. She had chosen her fate. She had cast me and my son aside without hesitation. She had built the very foundation of her downfall with her own cruelty. Still comma. I couldn't ignore the nagging thought in the back of my mind. Had she ever truly loved my son? Had she ever felt even a sliver of guilt for what she had done? I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. The next day, I saw her again. She was sitting on the park bench across the street, her eyes distant, lost. She'd once been so proud, so untouchable. Now she looked like just another person swallowed by life's hardships. For a moment, I considered walking over, saying something, anything at. But then I remembered the cold night on her porch, the way she had looked at me like I was nothing. So I turned away and walked back into my home. And this time, I didn't look back. The weeks passed and life settled into a new rhythm. The house no longer felt haunted by the past. It was mine now, truly mine. Every night, as I tucked Lucas into bed, I felt a quiet satisfaction that I had never known before. We were safe. We were home, but Caroline wasn't gone. She never approached me again after that day on the porch, but I saw her, sometimes at the grocery store, sometimes sitting alone in the park across the street. She never looked at me directly, never tried to make contact. She had once been the queen of this town, but now she was just another forgotten face. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't ignore the part of me that still waited for something. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was just the final nail in the coffin of my past. One evening, as I was locking up the house, I noticed her again. She was sitting on the curb outside, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the pavement like the world had swallowed her whole. And then, to my surprise, she turned her head and met my gaze. I should have gone inside. I should have turned away and left her to whatever fate had in store for her. But I didn't. Instead, I walked to the edge of the porch and stood there, arms crossed. She hesitated, then spoke. I lost everything. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. She swallowed hard. I didn't think, I didn't think it would end like this. Still, I said nothing. She let out a shaky breath. I was cruel to you. I see that now. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest thing I would ever get. For the first time in years, I saw her not as the woman who had ruined my life, but as something else. A cautionary tale. I could have let her suffer. I could have reveled in her downfall, watched as she rotted away in the town that once adored her. But I wasn't her. And I never would be. You should go, I said, my voice steady. There's nothing left for you here. She nodded, slow and resigned. And this time, when she walked away, I knew, really knew, that she was gone for good. The past no longer had a hold on me. I'd had one. And more importantly, I had moved on. The house was mine. My life was mine. And for the first time in a long time, the future was mine too. Even though Caroline had walked away that night, something lingered. The past wasn't something you could just scrub off like old paint. It seeped into the cracks, settled in the spaces between victories and silence. I thought I would feel free, that winning, truly, undeniably winning, would erase everything she had done to me. But some wounds don't heal with revenge. They just scar over, leaving behind a dull ache that resurfaces when you least expect it. One evening, I sat on the back porch, watching the sunset while Lucas played with his toys in the yard. The warmth of the fading sun should have been comforting, but my thoughts kept circling back to Caroline. I had taken her house, stripped her of the last thing she had left. And yet, instead of feeling triumph, I felt nothing. Was that what revenge was? A hollow victory? I shook the thought away. No, this wasn't just about revenge. This was about survival, about proving to myself that I could rise from nothing, rebuild, reclaim what was stolen from me. And I had. But what now? For years, I had been driven by anger, by the need to prove myself. That fire had kept me going when nothing else had. And now that it was gone, I felt untethered, as if I'd spent so long fighting that I had forgotten how to simply live. I needed to let go. Not for her, never for her. For me. I took a deep breath and turned to Lucas. He was everything. He had been my reason to push forward, my anchor when I had nothing else. I smiled and called out to him. Come inside, sweetheart, it's getting late. He grinned, running toward me, his laughter filling the space where bitterness used to live. That was what mattered. Dot not the past, not revenge, not Caroline. Dot just us, Dot. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally move forward. Dot truly move forward. Dot the days passed, and the weight on my chest slowly began to lift. The house, once a battleground of memories, was now filled with the simple joys of everyday life. Lucas and I settled into our routine, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was living instead of just surviving Dot. But life has a way of throwing unexpected twists, even when you think the story is over. Dot one afternoon, I was sorting through the last of the old boxes in the attic when I found something buried beneath a pile of dusty linens. A small locked box. It was heavy, made of dark wood with brass fittings, the kind of thing that looked like it held secrets. I hesitated before prying it open. The lock was old, rusted, barely holding together. One sharp tug, and it snapped. Dot inside comma, there were letters, dozens of them, stacked neatly, tied with a faded ribbon. Some were addressed to my ex-husband, others to Caroline. But it was the ones with my name on them that made my stomach twist. I unfolded the first one carefully, my hands trembling. Dot. It was from Caroline Dot, but it wasn't what I expected. Dot, the letter was dated just a few weeks before she had thrown me out, and as I read the words, my heart pounded. We need to act fast. She's getting suspicious. If she finds out what he did, it's over. What he did? I rifled through the stack, skimming frantically, my breath coming in short gasps. And then I found it. The letter that made my blood turn to ice. He took the money. I covered for him, but the bank will find out soon. If she goes digging, she'll know the truth. We have to cut her off completely. I sank to the floor, the letter slipping from my hands. Dot. It hadn't just been cruelty. It hadn't just been rejection. Dot. Caroline hadn't cast me out because she hated me. Dot. She had done it to protect her son. Dot. To keep me from uncovering his lies. Dot, my ex-husband, hadn't just walked away from our marriage. He had stolen from me, from our family. And when things started falling apart, Caroline had made sure I was erased before I could expose the truth. A cold realization settled over me. Dot, all this time, I had thought my revenge was complete, that taking the house was enough. Dot. But now I knew. Dot. It wasn't over. Dot. Not yet. I sat there for what felt like hours, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. All these years, I had believed that my suffering was just the result of a cruel, heartless woman wanting me gone. But this was something deeper. Caroline hadn't just been cruel. She had been strategic, calculated. Every single move, from locking me out to cutting me off from my ex-husband, had been a way to bury the truth. But now, the truth was in my hands. My ex-husband had stolen money. He had used me, our life together, as a shield while he took whatever he could. And when the walls started closing in, Caroline had sacrificed me to protect him. I felt sick. This house, the one I had fought so hard to reclaim, had been built on lies. And Caroline. She'd known. I forced myself to breathe. My fingers trembled as I gathered the letters, stacking them carefully. There had to be more, some kind of proof, something I could use. Because if I had spent the last 3 years thinking I'd won, I had been wrong. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about justice. I went through the letters one by one. There were mentions of accounts, banks, sums of money that didn't add up. References to deals that had fallen apart. Warnings about how much I knew and how dangerous that made me. And then, at the very bottom of the box, I found a key. A small silver key with a tag that read 5th Street Storage, #214. My pulse quickened. A storage unit. I had no idea what was inside, but I knew one thing. Caroline had spent years making sure I never found out. And now it was mine to uncover. The next day, I dropped Lucas off at school and drove straight to the storage facility. It was one of those cheap, no frills places on the edge of town, the kind of spot where people dump the things they wanted to forget. I approached the front desk, my fingers tightening around the key. "I need access to Unit 214. The clerk barely glanced at me as he checked his records. "Name on the account." I hesitated. If this was under Caroline's or my ex-husband's name, I was screwed. But something told me Caroline would have been too paranoid to put it under her real identity. I took a chance. "Mia Harper." The man typed for a second, then nodded. "You're good to go." I exhaled slowly. Dot, of course. Caroline had wiped me out of their lives, but she hadn't erased my existence completely. She had needed a name, a clean slate, to hide whatever was inside that unit. Dot, and she had used mine. I followed him down a long row of storage units, the air thick with dust and rusting metal. When we reached hash 214, he gestured for me to go ahead. I slid the key into the lock, turned it, and pulled the door open. Dot inside comma under the dim yellow light was everything they had tried to keep from me. Dot stacks of paperwork, boxes labeled with dates that matched the years of my marriage. And, sitting right in the middle of it all, a safe. Dot. My heart pounded. Dot, this wasn't over. Dot, not even close. I stepped inside, my breath slow and measured. Dust swirled in the stale air, the weight of the past pressing down on me. The boxes, the stacks of papers, the locked safe in the center of it all. This was the graveyard of secrets Caroline and my ex-husband had buried. And now, I was standing right in the middle of it. I reached for the nearest box, my hands trembling as I pulled back the lid. Dot inside were folders, neatly organized, labeled with dates spanning the last 6 years. I flipped one open. Bank statements, transactions that made no sense. Large withdrawals, money moving between accounts I didn't recognize. Dot, page after page. I pieced it together. Dot, my ex-husband had been funneling money, taking from joint accounts, siphoning funds into hidden savings. The more I read, the more nauseous I felt. This wasn't just a case of financial irresponsibility. He had been setting himself up long before our marriage crumbled, preparing for the day he would walk away and leave me with nothing. Dot and Caroline. She had known Dot. She had helped him cover his tracks. I clenched my jaw, my fingers digging into the paper. I had spent years thinking I'd lost everything because of cruelty and cold-heartedness. But this was premeditated, a carefully executed plan to discard me when I was no longer useful. I moved to another box, this one heavier. I lifted the lid, and my breath caught. Dot, documents. Dot, legal papers, property records. Dot, and at the very top, a manila envelope with my name on it. I tore it open. Dot, inside was a letter, written in my ex-husband's careless scrawl. "If she ever comes looking, this is what you tell her. She'll believe it. She's naive enough to think people are good." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. I had been naive once, but not anymore. Dot, my eyes flicked to the safe. I had no idea what was inside, but I knew one thing. Caroline and my ex-husband had gone through hell to keep me from it. I scanned the room, searching for anything that could give me a clue to the combination. A sticky note, a scribbled number, anything. Then I saw it. Dot. On the side of one of the boxes, faded but still visible, was a sequence of numbers. A date. Dot, our wedding anniversary. I let out a bitter laugh. Dot, of course. Dot, hands steady. I turned to the safe and punched in the numbers. Dot, click. Dot, the lock released. Dot. The door creaked open. Dot, and inside, sitting in the dim light, was the final piece of the puzzle. Dot, stacks of cash. Dot, bundles, comma, neatly wrapped, piled high. Dot, more money than I had ever seen in one place. Dot, and next to it, a single USB drive. I reached for it, my heart hammering. Dot, this was it. Whatever was on this drive was the reason they had erased me from their lives. And now it was mine. I wasn't just taking their house, I was taking everything. I clutched the USB drive in my shaking hand, staring at it like it held the weight of the entire past 3 years. Maybe it did. Whatever was on this tiny piece of plastic and metal had been worth destroying my life over. It had been worth Caroline shutting me out, worth my ex-husband vanishing without a trace. I exhaled sharply and stuffed it into my pocket. I needed to see what was on it, but not here. Not in this dusty tomb of their secrets. I needed to be somewhere safe. I took one last look around the storage unit. The piles of cash, the damning paperwork, the stacks of deception that had built their comfortable lives while I scraped by, humiliated and struggling. A sharp, bitter laugh rose in my throat. They had done everything they could to make me powerless, Dot. And now, I held their destruction in my hands. I closed the safe, locked it back, and carefully stacked the papers I'd pulled out. No need to tip them off just yet. Let them think their secrets were still buried. Let them believe they had gotten away with it. For now. I left the storage unit, my heart hammering as I stepped back into the daylight. It felt too bright, too sharp, like the world had shifted while I was inside. My mind was racing ahead, already planning my next move. First comma. I needed to see what was on the USB. Second question mark. I needed to decide just how much destruction I was about to unleash. Back at my house, my house. I locked the front door behind me and hurried to my laptop. I could hear Lucas playing in his room, his soft hums drifting through the hallway. That sound grounded me, reminded me why I had fought so hard to climb back up. I plugged the USB in, my fingers tapping anxiously against the desk as the drive loaded. A single folder popped up on the screen, labeled Insurance. I clicked on it, my pulse thudding in my ears. Inside were dozens of files, PDFs, spreadsheets, scanned documents. I opened the first one and immediately felt my stomach drop. Bank records. Huge deposits, transactions linking my ex-husband and Caroline to names I didn't recognize, offshore accounts, wire transfers. I flipped to another file. Emails. One subject line caught my eye instantly. If she asks, we say she cheated first. My vision blurred with fury. I forced myself to read. The email was from my ex-husband to Caroline, dated just days before he left me. She'll break down. She'll beg. Just stick to the story no matter what. If we do this right, she won't have the resources to fight back. I gritted my teeth so hard my jaw ached. They had planned it. The lies, the smear campaign, the complete erasure of me from their lives. Another file. Legal documents. A drafted divorce agreement, one I had never even seen, outlining how all of our assets would be transferred solely to him. It was never about the marriage failing. It was about making sure I was left with nothing. And then, at the very bottom, a video file. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse. I clicked play. The screen flickered and grainy security footage appeared. A room, a hotel from the look of it. My ex-husband was there. So was another man, someone I didn't recognize. They were talking, their voices muffled. Then the audio cleared. If she fights it, we pull the money and cut her off completely. She won't have the means to come after us. My ex-husband laughed, taking a sip of his drink. She thinks I loved her. The other man chuckled. And now? Now? She's just a loose end? I slammed the laptop shut, my whole body shaking. Loose end. That's all I had ever been to them, a means to an end, a pawn in their game. But they had made one crucial mistake. They hadn't buried me deep enough. I wasn't a loose end anymore. I was a reckoning. And they had no idea what was coming. I sat there, my fingers curled into fists against the desk. My breathing was slow, measured, too controlled for the storm brewing inside me. The weight of what I had just seen pressed down like a boulder on my chest. I had spent years believing I was the victim of a cruel, impulsive betrayal. that my ex-husband had simply fallen out of love, that his mother had turned her back on me out of heartlessness. But this was premeditated, calculated, a conspiracy designed to leave me powerless, abandoned, and struggling just to survive. And it almost worked, almost. I forced myself to take a breath, to calm the rage curling in my gut. I couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. This wasn't the time for reckless anger. This was the time for strategy. Caroline had lost the house. That was my first victory. But this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. And justice required patience. I spent the next hour going through the files, cataloging everything. Screenshots, copies, backups. I saved it all. I wasn't just gathering evidence, I was preparing for war. And I knew exactly where to start. 2 days later, I stood outside Caroline's new, much smaller house on the other side of town. It was a far cry from the grand home she used to own, the home I now owned. She had downsized, forced into something modest, the kind of house she would have sneered at before. I knocked on the door, the USB drive clutched in my pocket like a hidden dagger. The door creaked open, and there she was. Caroline. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in her expression. Maybe fear, maybe just surprise. But then, as if remembering who she was supposed to be, she straightened, her mouth curling into a bitter smirk. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice laced with forced indifference. I let the silence stretch between us. Let her feel it. The power shift, the tension. Then, slowly, I smiled. "I just thought you should know," I said, keeping my voice light, almost casual, "that I finally got around to cleaning out my storage unit." Her smirk faltered. I saw it, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She tried to mask it, but I knew her too well. "You always did like digging where you don't belong," she said coolly. "Old habits die hard, I guess." I tilted my head. "So do old secrets." That did it. She stiffened, her knuckles going white against the doorframe. "Good." I leaned in just slightly, my voice dropping low. "Tell me, Caroline," I murmured. "How do you think your friends would feel about knowing the truth? About what you and your son did to me?" Her breath hitched. I smiled wider. "Oh, and don't worry," I added. "I made plenty of copies. Wouldn't want anything disappearing." I stepped back, giving her one last long look before turning away. I didn't need to hear her response. I had already won this round. But I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. The courtroom was packed. The air was thick with tension, the kind that feels heavy in your chest, like a storm ready to break. I sat in the front row, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to contain the overwhelming rush of emotions that surged through me. Today was the day. Today I would finally get the justice I deserved out across the room. Caroline sat with her lawyer, her face pale, but she still carried herself with that same haughty arrogance. I could see it in the way she clutched her purse, the way she sat up straight as if her pride was the only thing holding her together. And then there was Nathaniel, my ex-husband, sitting beside her, his eyes darting nervously from one corner of the room to the next. I almost felt sorry for him. He had no idea what was coming. The judge called the court to order, and I focused on the files spread out before me. My lawyer had done an impeccable job, and now it was time to let the truth unfold. As the trial went on, I watched as the pieces of the puzzle I had carefully put together over the past few months finally started to fall into place. The offshore accounts, the illegal transactions, the doctored documents, all of it was coming to light. Nathaniel and Caroline's conspiracy to steal from me, to manipulate the system and destroy my life, was being laid bare for everyone to see. The moment arrived. The final witness took the stand. It was one of their former business partners, the one who had tried to distance himself when he realized things were getting too messy. His testimony was damning. He didn't hold back. He described in detail how Caroline had manipulated him, how she had forced him into making false statements, how they had planned everything from the beginning. Nathaniel's face went white as a ghost. He leaned forward in his seat, clutching the armrests as if trying to keep himself upright. I could see the panic in his eyes, the fear of being exposed for the first time. The empire they had built on lies was crumbling around them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Deet the judge didn't hesitate. With a clear, firm voice, he announced the verdict. Caroline and Nathaniel were found guilty of conspiracy, fraud, and multiple counts of financial misconduct. Their assets were seized, their business contracts voided, and their reputations destroyed. The weight that lifted from my chest in that moment was indescribable. I had fought for so long through sleepless nights and endless tears, and now I had won, not just for myself, but for Lucas, for the life we had fought to build. I glanced over at Caroline and Nathaniel. Caroline had her head bowed, her face streaked with the faintest hint of humiliation. Nathaniel was shaking, barely able to stand, his hands trembling. They were defeated, completely, utterly broken. I didn't feel sorry for them, in that moment. I understood something important. Revenge, justice. It wasn't about bringing them to their knees for me to stand over them. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my son's future. They had stolen everything, but in the end, they had lost everything. Months passed. The dust settled. The town had forgotten about Caroline and Nathaniel, their names now synonymous with failure and disgrace. Their house was sold, their business dissolved, and they were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. As for me, I stood in front of my new house one afternoon, watching Lucas chase after the dog in the yard. My heart swelled with a quiet satisfaction. The struggle, the pain. It had all led to this. I had found peace. I had found a future. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was my life. And it was real. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting another call from my lawyer or one of the people involved in Caroline's downfall. But this time it was a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." My heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. I had moved on. I didn't need more chaos in my life. But something inside me stirred. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the need for closure. I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came quickly. "It's me, Nathaniel." I froze. I should have ignored it. I should have moved on with my life, left the past in the past. But I couldn't resist. I had to know what he wanted. I typed, "What do you want?" The reply was almost immediate. "I made a mistake. I was wrong. Please, just hear me out." I looked at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. For the briefest moment, I considered it. But then I realized something. I had already heard enough from him. I had spent so many years listening to their lies, their manipulations. I didn't need to hear anything more. With a deep breath, I hit delete and turned off my phone. I wasn't going back to that life. I had already made my peace. And as I watched Lucas play in the yard, his laughter echoing in the air, I knew this was the life I deserved. This was the victory I'd fought for. I didn't need Nathaniel or Caroline's apologies. I had something far more valuable. I had my son, and that was enough. "You're not my problem anymore," I had said to Caroline that day. And now, as the years passed and my life continued to flourish, I realized just how true that statement had been. They had lost everything. I had gained everything. And I was finally free.